Yes, he did absolutely nothing in terms of resolving any type of financial concerns that were involving housing or banking or Wall Street. In fact, a gentleman named Bolton was key in the hiring of Paulson for Bush, and he actually said that he was bringing Paulson in to assure financial stability. No more than a few months into Paulson's tenure with Bush, he made a kind of an introductory speech at Columbia University, and he listed his top 4 priorities, and not a single one of them had anything to do with the financial situation, the housing situation, or the banking situation. You know, he totally ignored those, but I think this is very telling as to who this man really is. One of his 4 items that he listed was the redistribution of wealth as a top priority for his tenure as Treasury Secretary.
Wow, and he did a good job then.
Oh, he sure did.
Yeah. Well, I understand Mr. Blankfein was installed as the CEO of Goldman Sachs when Hank Paulson went to the government.
Yes.
And he, in April of 2010, said that he believed Goldman Sachs had no moral obligation to tell its clients it was betting against a product that it was asking them to buy.
Yes, and I think he has just reaffirmed that here very recently after some of the government lawsuits against Goldman Sachs for fraudulently presenting securities that they knew were bad as being top rate. And I think he reaffirmed that here very recently again, that he didn't think there was anything wrong with Goldman Sachs promoting those as high quality when knowing that they were very, very questionable, supported by loans to people who did not have a job and with no money down.
Right.
And 0 interest rates to boot. And you know that people like Blankfein and Paulson, too, had to have known about the weakness that was inherent in the housing financial structure at the time whenever that change was made with Paulson coming into Treasury.
Oh, sure. They had to have known.
Well, was that mostly people that were sending money back to Mexico because they didn't have the wherewithal to get through the normal banks, and they had to pass a special law to allow them to send money back into their homes that were here illegally?
I would say that was a contributor, and I really can't answer that with good quantitative evidence, but I don't think it would have been a sizable factor. I think a greater factor was just making the availability of loans so easy for what was called low and moderate income people. And that was the language you see in the bills that were written back in the 90s to reduce the regulatory requirements. Now, it is true that there was pressure put on to have credit-type organizations as well as lending organizations to recognize the illegal content of our population. And it is also true, as you said, that a great part of their earnings goes back to Mexico to support their family rather than being a part of the money spent in our society.
So it's all just a great redistribution of wealth is quite frankly what it boils down to.
Well, yeah, and they sure got a lot of our wealth out of that whole housing thing. My goodness, the estimates are trillions of dollars that were lost, and a great part of money was redistributed, through the bailout of these various financial concerns that had basically provided funding to people who had very little, if any, hope of ever repaying the loans.
Right. I want to fast forward now to a Goldman Sachs 2016, where we see them paying Hillary Clinton $200,000 per speech. And in fact, there are groups of Democrats that are calling for the transcripts of those speeches to be revealed to the voters. What kind of a relationship are you aware of between Hillary Clinton and Goldman Sachs?
Well, I think it's more the typical Democrat Goldman Sachs relationship of the past, and what Hillary as Secretary of State offered them was a special entree into some of their foreign transactions. Now, Janice, I don't keep up with that a whole lot, but I know Goldman Sachs has been involved in the activities involving Greece and their bailout programs, the activities involving the International Monetary Fund, and as a result, a relationship with Hillary Clinton as the Secretary of State, more so than Hillary Clinton herself, became very important to Goldman Sachs during her tenure.
Oh, that's interesting. Now, Bill, you live in Pennsylvania, and you're coming up to your primary this Tuesday, correct?
Oh my goodness, yes, and I mean it's the talk of the day, the year, the century. I'm not sure, but a lot of consternation about how our delegates are awarded. Let's put it that way.
Oh, isn't that an interesting discussion that, quite frankly, Donald Trump has brought into the spotlight, the process that has been in place for forever, that the people didn't really know about until this election cycle. I'm jumping around because we have only a short amount of time to talk to you, and I'm fascinated by your wealth of information. I do want to offer my respect to all of our friends who are supporting Ted Cruz, but I also want to bring up the fact that Goldman Sachs has or had an employee named Heidi Cruz. And that's Ted Cruz's wife, as I'm sure most of us know because we're all pretty politically astute. But Bill, you did a little bit of research on the campaign donations that Ted Cruz is getting. Could you give the audience a little overview of that situation?
Yes, Janice. This was a surprise. Just like whenever I was looking at the book information and found out that the Democrats were the beneficiaries of Wall Street. I didn't expect this amount of money, but here, as we sit today, using the Open Secrets people, Cruz has raised $120 million through the end of February for his campaign and currently on outside groups. So $120 million. Now, $66 million of that comes from his own campaign, but $53 million comes from the super PACs. That $120 million kind of dwarfs what we normally think of as huge donations, and includes donations as big as $15 million from one group in Texas, $11 million from another group, and $11 million, by the way, is a financial group.
Wow!
And when you see the amount of money that is flowing, it looks like that by the time we reach the convention, that his campaign will have raised and spent $150 million or perhaps even more.
Wow. I mean, that's just amazing. And the media doesn't let us know these things. It takes a true investigative journalist like you, Bill Bin. His name is Bill Bin. I want you to write that name down. The book is Masters of Audacity and Deceit. And I'm sorry.
Spell it.
Spell his name, B-E-E-N.
Yeah.
Bill,
Right.
B-E-E-N. Bill, I want to thank you so much for joining us. We are going to move on. I'm going to have you back for an interview, and I want to continue the discussion because I think it's so vitally important to our audience. Thank you again so much for joining us.
Thanks
All right.
a lot.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Now, we have this morning an event going on. There are protests around the nation for against Planned Parenthood, and we have Bob from Warren who would like to talk about that. Good morning, Bob.
Morning, Mayor Daniels.
How are you, dear?
Good, good. I'm calling to find out, first of all, I need to find out how Bill Bin spells his first name.
B-I-L-L.
Okay, thank you. I didn't make that clear. I'm calling to find out if the event is still going on today in Warren.
Yes, it is. The protest of the Planned Parenthood abortion murder facility, if you will.
You're tipping your hand.
Yeah, I know. I'm, hold me back. I can't always say what I want to say. I know that, but I have such a hard time because I can't stop but want to tell the truth about what's going on. We all know that abortion is murder. In fact, there is a woman, I think in Roseville, who was just sentenced to life in prison because she allowed her newborn baby to die. Freeze to death. And yet, 1 month earlier, according to the leftists in this world, that woman could have gotten rid of or disposed of that baby, and it would have been perfectly legal. That is an abomination.
Yes.
It is an abomination. So yes, Bob, the rally outside the Warren Planned Parenthood facility on Van Dyke, north of 12 Mile, on the east side of Van Dyke, is scheduled for 9 o'clock this morning through 11 o'clock. In fact, there are protests around the country, I guess about 200 of them, and go to protestpp.com, protestpp.com for more information about that. We are coming to the end of our segment here, Bob. I want to thank you for calling, and we're going to turn the conversation over to all things Islam and communism. We've got two big topics next hour. I want to ask you to stay tuned, and the audience, please call in 734-822-1600, and we will be right back.